I stood at the kitchen table, holding a photograph of my wife, Vanessa, hugging my brother, Neil. The laughter in her face cut me like a knife. 30 years of marriage, and this is what I got. But when I told her, she just shrugged. "You shouldn't care," she said. I smiled, handed her the envelope, and left. Her scream as she opened it still echoes in my ears. This was only the beginning. I was going to get justice for myself, and no one was going to stop me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I sat at a corner table in the dimly lit restaurant, the clinking of glasses and murmured conversations swirling around me like fog. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the neon glow of Portland's downtown. My fingers tapped the stem of a wine glass. The wait for Vanessa stretched on longer than her usual tardiness. 30 years of marriage, and I still gave her the benefit of the doubt. Foolish, maybe. Then I saw them. Across the room, in a booth tucked under a flickering sconce, Vanessa leaned towards Neil. Her hand rested on his arm, her laugh sharp and bright, slicing through the hum of the restaurant. My brother, with his slick grin and tailored michelet, tilted his head closer, whispering something that made her eyes spark. I froze. The wine glass trembled in my grip, a drop spilling onto the white tablecloth and spreading like blood. I'd come to surprise her, to salvage a night after another late shift at the office, but instead I was the one surprised. My chest tightened, each breath a struggle against the weight of what I saw. Were they just catching up? Neil had always been the charming one, the brother I'd bailaid out of debt, the one I trusted. But Vanessa's fingers lingered too long. Her smile was too intimate. "Jack," her voice cut through my haze. She'd seen me, her face shifting from delight to something harder, like a mask snapping into place. Neil leaned back, adjusting his flashy watch. I'd never be able to afford that. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I didn't expect to see you here." She slid out of the booth, smoothing her dress. "Oh, it's just Neil," she said, her tone light, but her eyes darted to the side, a tale I'd ignored for years. "Catching up," I echoed, my gaze flicking to Neil. He flashed a smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Good to see you, Michael. Been a while," he said. Words stuck in my throat. The restaurant felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of garlic and betrayal. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "I'll let you get back to it, Michael," Vanessa started, but I was already moving. I abandoned the wine glass, its stain a silent accusation. Rain hit my face as I pushed through the door, the cold biting through my thin michelet. My watch caught my eye, its hands frozen at 7:43. Time itself seemed to mock me. In my car, the engine hummed, but I didn't drive. Rain pelted the windshield. Each drop was a question. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind, or had they been that good at hiding it? My hand brushed an old envelope on the passenger seat. A gift from Vanessa years ago, with a love note tucked inside. Now, it felt like a relic from a life that no longer existed. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I'd done everything for her. Our home, our life. And Neil, the brother I'd helped through his failures, was sitting there with her, laughing. The image burned, but doubt nodded at me. Was it just a moment or something more? I needed to know. I needed to remember who we were before all this. The rain hadn't stopped, hammering the roof of our house in Portland's quiet suburbs. I sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from a flickering lamp that Vanessa had always hated. A photo album lay open on my lap, its pages heavy with memories that I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. The scene from the restaurant replayed in my mind. Vanessa's laugh, Neil's smirk, the wine staining the tablecloth. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I flipped a page. There we were, younger, standing outside our first home, a cramped bungalow that we had painted ourselves. Vanessa wore my old flannel, grinning as paint speckled her cheeks. I'd worked double shifts to afford that place, coming home to her laughter and warmth. When had that changed? When had her smiles turned sharp and her words clipped? Another photo, our wedding, her veil catching the breeze. I'd promised her everything and tried nights at the office, crunching numbers to buy her the diamond earring she wanted, the bigger house she deserved. She'd thanked me, her arms around my neck. But over time, those moments faded. This life's so small, Michael. I thought she meant the view, but she was talking about our marriage. I turned another page and a letter slipped out, its edges yellowed. Her handwriting, so familiar, stared back at me. "Jack, you're my hero always." The words stung, a cruel contrast to the woman who had dismissed me that night. I crumpled the paper, its faint perfume clinging to my fingers. It hit the trash can with a soft thud. The house was too quiet. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. I'd sacrificed dreams for her, trips to the coast, a boat that I'd sketched in my head. For what? To watch her lean into Neil, to feel like a stranger in my own life. I'd trusted him too, paid for his college when he flunked out, lent him money when his sure-thing deals fell through. He'd always been the charmer, the one who got away with everything. Not this time. I stood, packing the room. The album lay open, a frozen past mocking the present. Vanessa's coldness had grown over the years. Her complaints, her eyes were always searching for something more. I thought it was my fault that I wasn't enough. Now I wondered if it was her or him. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but my thoughts raced. I couldn't keep doubting. I couldn't let this consume me. I needed answers, not memories. The letter in the trash felt like a line drawn between who I was and who I needed to be. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts. There was a name I hadn't called in years, someone who could dig up the truth. My thumb hovered over the screen, the clock ticking louder in my ears. Morning light filtered through the blinds of my office, a cramped space in downtown Portland where I'd spent decades balancing books and dreams. Rain tapped on the window. The steady rhythm matched my racing thoughts. The restaurant, Vanessa's hand on Neil's arm, the stopped watch, it all churned in my head. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unlearn the doubt. My desk was cluttered with ledgers, but today, numbers meant nothing. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't used in years. Joe Callahan, a private detective I had met during a fraud case. At work, he was gruff and chain-smoking, but sharp. My thumb hesitated. Calling him meant crossing a line, admitting that I didn't trust my wife or my brother. But staying in the dark was worse. I hit dial. Callahan. A gruff voice answered, cutting through the static. "Joe, it's Michael Carter. I need your help." My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. "Jack, it's been a while. What's up?" His tone was casual, but I heard the creak of a chair, the shift to attention. "I need you to look into someone," I said, swallowing the words heavily. Discreetly, I added. "My wife, Vanessa," I said, pausing, then adding a low whistle. "All right, meet me at the diner on 5th in an hour. Bring whatever you've got." I hung up, my hand shaking. From my wallet, I pulled a photo of Vanessa smiling, taken years ago, before her warmth turned to ice. I stared at it, then slid it into the same envelope as last night's. It felt heavier now, bearing the weight of intent. The diner smelled of coffee and grease, its windows fogged from the rain. Joe sat in a corner booth, his coat damp, a stubbed-out cigarette in the ashtray. He nodded as I slid into the seat across from him, his eyes scanning me as though I were evidence. "Spill it, Michael. What's she done?" I pushed the envelope across the table. "I saw her with my brother, Neil. Too close. I need to know what's going on." Joe opened the envelope and glanced at the photo. "This her?" I nodded. He tucked it away. "It won't be cheap, but I'll find out what's there." "Anything else I should know?" "They're clever. Neil's always been slippery. And Vanessa, she's not who she was." Joe grunted and jotted a note. "Give me a week. I'll dig up what are they hiding." He stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "Stay calm, Michael. Don't tip them off." Back in my office, I locked the envelope in my desk drawer. Its presence was a quiet promise. The rain outside hadn't let up, mirroring the storm in my chest. I glanced at my watch, which was still stopped, a reminder of the moment everything had shifted. What would Joe find? A fling. Something worse. The truth felt like a sharp, close-drawn blade, but I couldn't stop now. In my car, I started the engine. Idling, I stared at the rain-blurred city. A week, Joe had said. See, 7 days until the truth came knocking. I gripped the wheel, wondering if I was ready for what it might bring. Rain slid down the windshield as I pulled up to the squat brick building in Portland's old town, the kind of place that smelled of damp paper and bad decisions. Joe Callahan's office was on the second floor, up a staircase that creaked as if it held grudges. My coat was soaked. The weight of the last week was heavier than the weather. I'd hired Joe to investigate Vanessa and Neil, and now, after his call this morning, I was bracing myself for answers I wasn't sure I wanted. Inside, the office was a mess. Piles of files teetered on the desk, a coffee pot hissed in the corner, and a single bulb cast shadows over Joe's weathered face. He was leaning back in his chair, his boots propped on a crate, and he slid a thin folder across the desk. "Here's what I've found out. Got so far, Michael." I opened it, my hand steady despite the churn in my gut. Pages of typed notes, timestamps, locations. Vanessa and Neil had met 3 times that week, twice at a cafe near his apartment and once at a hotel downtown. My jaw tightened as I read, the words blurring. "Photos are in the back," Joe said, his voice rough but not unkind. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like my thoughts. I flipped to the images. They were grainy but clear enough. Vanessa's hand on Neil's arm, her head tilted in laughter. Neil smirking, his watch glinting under the cafe's lights. My brother, who I'd pulled out of debt more times than I could count, sitting too close to my wife. I shut the folder, my fingers pressing hard against the edge. "This is it," I said, my voice low but carrying the anger I'd kept leashed. Joe shrugged, exhaling smoke. "It's a start. They're careful but not careful enough. I can keep digging." But he paused, tapping ash into a tray. "There's something else not in the report yet. Neil's got dealings that don't add up. Might be bigger than an affair." "Bigger how?" I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. He waved a hand. "Give me a few days. It's murky, but it could be trouble." His eyes met mine, steady. "You sure you want the whole picture?" I nodded, though my throat tightened. "Everything." "No matter what," Joe grunted, jotting a note. "All right. I'll call when I've got." He stood, signaling that the meeting was over. I tucked the folder into the same old envelope that had come from the car, and which was now a vessel for my unraveling life, and left, the rain feeling colder against my skin. Back home, the house was dark. Vanessa was out somewhere that she hadn't bothered to mention. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of me, its contents a quiet indictment. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a reminder of time slipping away. I'd paid for Neil's apartment, his second chances, and this was my reward. Vanessa's laughter in those photos cut deeper than her lies. But Joe's hint about Neil's dealings lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. What else were they hiding? I needed to know, and soon. The rain had turned to a drizzle by the time I reached Joe's office again, 3 days after our last meeting. Portland streets glistened under gray skis. The city was as restless as I was. My hands gripped the steering wheel. The envelope from last time was now heavier, bearing witness to what I had read. Vanessa and Neil meeting in secret, laughing as though I didn't exist. Joe's call this morning had been brief. "Got something you need to see." I wasn't sure I was ready, but I parked and climbed the familiar creaky stairs. Joe's office hadn't changed. Same clutter, same stale coffee smell, same dim light that made everything feel like a confession. He didn't waste time pushing a new folder towards me. "Take a look," he said. His voice was gruff, and he already had a cigarette burning between his fingers. I opened the folder, and the first photo hit me like a punch. Vanessa and Neil in his car, her hand on his, their faces close, caught in a moment that wasn't meant for me. Another shot showed them outside a hotel, with Neil's arm around her waist. My chest went cold, and each image carved away the last of my doubts. 30 years of marriage reduced to grainy proof of betrayal. "There's more," Joe said, watching me. "Neil's not just playing your wife. He's got something else going on. Something that could burn him badly." I looked up, my fingers still on the photos. "What is it?" Joe leaned back, exhaling smoke. "Not sure yet. Looks like he's mixed up in some shady deals. Money moving where it shouldn't. I'm close, but it's tricky. If I'm right, this could ruin him." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You want me to keep pushing?" "Yes," I said, my voice flat but firm. "I need it all." He nodded, scribbling something on a pad. "All right, but this kind of dirt isn't just personal. It could be dangerous." He slid the photos back into the folder. "You're holding dynamite, Michael." I tucked the photos into the envelope, its edges worn from handling. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a rage I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Vanessa's smile in those pictures wasn't the one I'd loved. It was calculated and cruel. And Neil, who'd mocked my boring job while I bailaid him out, had crossed a line. "Forgive." I left Joe's office, the rain picking up again and drumming on my hood as I drove home. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, a silent partner in whatever came next. At home, I spread the photos on the kitchen table, each one a wound but also a weapon. Joe's warning about meal deals echoed in my mind. What was he hiding? Something worse than an affair. I poured myself an untouched coffee and stared at the images. The clock ticked steadily as my mind turned. I wouldn't confront them, not yet. I needed a plan, something sharp enough to cut through their lies. Rain streaked the windshield of my parked car, and the streetlights cast fractured reflections across the glass. I sat in the quiet of the Portland suburbs, a block from home, with the envelope containing Joe's photos on the seat beside me. The images burned in my mind. Vanessa's hand in Neil's, their shared laughter, a betrayal sharper than any knife. But Joe's warning about Neil's deals had shifted something in me. Something in me shifted. This wasn't just about an affair. There was more, and I'd find it. I pulled a notepad from the glove compartment and began to take quick, deliberate notes. Photos, proof, timing. A scandal would be easy, storm in a teacup, watch them squirm. But that was weak and fleeting. I wanted justice, not chaos. Something that would hit them where it hurt, something they couldn't dodge. My breath fogged the air. The car's heater had been dead for a long time. The clock on the dashboard read 11:17 p.m., each tick a reminder that time was mine to wield. I flipped through the photos again, my fingers cold. Vanessa's smile, once my anchor, now mocked me. Neil's smug grin, the same one he'd worn when he borrowed money he never repaid, fueled my resolve. They thought I was predictable, a dull accountant they could outsmart. They were wrong. The envelope felt heavier, its contents a map to their downfall. I scribbled another note. Note: anniversary. Our 30th was weeks away, a date Vanessa had already planned to celebrate with a dinner at home. She'd invited Neil, of course, but her excuse for inviting him was as thin as the rain outside. That dinner could be my stage, a moment to turn their lies against them. But how? The photos were a start, but Joe's hint at Neil's secrets promised something bigger. I needed that piece, something undeniable. I tucked the envelope into its presence was a quiet vow. My mind raced, piecing together fragments. Neil's greed, Vanessa's cold ambition. They had built this betrayal together. I had been their fool, but no longer. The plan forming in my head was risky, like walking a tightrope over a chasm, but I would walk it. I had to. The rain eased, leaving only drips on the windshield. I started the car. The engine hummed, steadying my pulse. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw the house. Loomed dark. Vanessa was either asleep or out. The clock in the hall would tick when I walked in, counting down to the anniversary. I would use every second, every scrap of proof, to build something they couldn't escape. My hand rested on the glove box. The envelope inside was a promise of what was to come. The dining room glowed with candlelight. The table was set with china that we hadn't used in years. Rain pattered against the windows of our Portland home, a soft drumbeat to the tension coiling in my chest. I adjusted my tie. The mirror reflected a man I barely recognized. Gray hair, steady eyes, a stranger to the fool who had trusted Vanessa for 30 years. Tonight was our anniversary, a milestone she had insisted on celebrating, and I had played along, knowing this was my stage. Vanessa swept in, her burgundy dress clinging to her like a second skin, her smile as polished as the silverware. "Everything looks perfect, Michael," she said, her voice honeyed but her eyes flicked to the door. Neil was coming, of course. Her family excuse was as thin as the mist outside. I nodded, my face a mask, and poured the wine, watching her every move. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, each second a countdown. I'd spent weeks building my plan, hiding the envelope of evidence in my office. But tonight wasn't for confrontation. Not yet. I needed to see how far she would go. We sat, the air thick with her perfume and my suspicion. She raised her glass, her bracelet glinting. "To 30 years of love," she said, her tone full of performance. 30 years, I echoed, my voice low, my eyes locked on hers. Her hand trembled just for a moment as she set her glass down. Then I saw it, her other hand slipping to her lap, clutching something small and powdery. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral, sipping my water instead of the wine. She turned to adjust a napkin, and in that split second her fingers moved over my glass, and a faint dust fell into the red. My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. Poison. A sedative. I didn't know, but the betrayal burned hotter than ever. She thought me blind, a pawn in her game with Neil. I smiled, sliding the glass aside, untouched. "Not thirsty tonight," I said, my tone light, but her eyes widened, revealing a crack in her facade. "Dessert?" she asked too quickly, standing to fetch a tray. Her hands shook as she sliced the cake, the knife catching the light like a warning. I leaned back, the clocks ticking louder in my ears. She was unraveling, and I hadn't even shown my hand. The rain outside grew heavier, a curtain between this moment and the truth I'd soon unveil. Dinner dragged on, her small talk a desperate shield. I answered sparingly, my mind on the envelope, the photos, the reports. What had she planned with that powder? Was Neil part of it? I needed to know more. "I'd get it." As she cleared the plates, I stood up, brushing past her to the hall. The clock struck 10. Its chime was my signal. I glanced back at her silhouette, framed by candlelight, and thought of the evidence waiting for me in my office. The real celebration was coming. Morning light filtered through the blinds of my office, a cramped corner of Portland's downtown, where numbers had once defined my life. Rain tapped the window, softer now, a whisper compared to last night's storm. The anniversary dinner replayed in my mind, Vanessa's trembling hand, the powder in my wine, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. I sat at my desk, the envelope from Joe's reports in front of me. Its weight was a promise of justice. I opened it, spreading the contents across the desk. Photos of Vanessa and Neil, their stolen moments captured in grainy detail, typed notes on their meetings, and Joe's cryptic warning about Neil's dealings. I added my own, a meticulous timeline of each step in their betrayal. My pen moved with precision, labeling, organizing, building a case as airtight as the ledgers. I'd balanced for decades. This wasn't rage, it was calculation. The folder I prepared was thick, its pages were weapons. I'd considered confronting them last night, letting the truth spill over the cake and candles. But that would have been too easy. They'd have denied, deflected, and turned it on me. No, I needed something undeniable, a moment that would strip them bare. The dinner tomorrow with Neil and his wife, Sarah, was my chance. Sarah deserved to know, too. She'd been as blind as I was. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. "Sarah, it's Michael," I said when she answered, her voice hesitant. "Can you come to dinner at our place tomorrow? It's important." A pause then. "Is everything okay?" Her tone was tense, as if she sensed something. "Just come," I said, keeping it vague. 700. She agreed, and I hung up, my fingers drumming on the desk. Sarah's presence would shift the dynamic, make Neil squirm. I tucked the folder into the envelope, sealing it with care, and slid it into a locked drawer. The steady ticking of the clock on the wall was a reminder that time was on my side. I leaned back, the rain's rhythm syncing with my thoughts. Vanessa thought she could outsmart me by slipping powder into my glass, playing the devoted wife. Neil, with his slick charm and shady deals, thought he was untouchable. They'd mocked my quiet life and steady job, but they'd underestimated me. This folder, this plan, was my answer. The office felt smaller, the air heavy with purpose. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and left, the absence of the envelope in my hand a silent vow. Tomorrow I'd bring it to the dinner and let its contents speak for themselves. As I locked the door, the clock showed late afternoon. The rain was now a faint drizzle. I stepped outside. The dining room was a stage, its long table set with crisp linens and gleaming glasses. The scent of roasted herbs mingled with the damp air from the rain outside. I moved through our Portland home with purpose, arranging plates and pouring wine, each action a step towards the reckoning. Tonight wasn't just dinner. It was the moment I'd been building towards. The envelope in my mic-lit pocket was like a ticking bomb. Vanessa was the first to arrive, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Her smile was as brittle as the autumn leaves scattered outside. "You've outdone yourself, Michael," she said, her voice too bright, her eyes avoiding mine. I nodded, watching her adjust a napkin, her fingers restless. She didn't know I'd seen the powder last night. She didn't know the folder in my office held her secrets. Neil arrived next, his laugh booming as he shrugged off his coat. "Jack, you old dog," he said, clapping my shoulder. His eyes, though, scanned the room, lingering on Vanessa a beat too long. I poured him wine. My face was neutral, the weight of the envelope grounding me. Sarah followed, her face pale, her greeting quiet. She clutched her purse like a lifeline, her gaze flickering to Neil, then away. We sat. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, its rhythm a pulse beneath the small talk. Vanessa played hostess, her laughter forced, her hand brushing against mine as she passed the bread. Sarah barely spoke, her fork scraping her plate, her eyes darting between them. I watched. It was all deliberate, my silence, my wine untouched. The rain drummed a steady backdrop to the tension, which was coiling tighter. "To family," Neil said, raising his glass, grinning widely, but his voice was sharp. "And to Michael for hosting us." "Family," I repeated, my tone even, my eyes on Vanessa. She froze, her glass halfway to her lips, then forced a smile. Sarah's hand tightened on her napkin, her knuckles white. The moment hung heavy, the clock ticking louder. Vanessa broke the silence, her voice high. "Jack's always been good at bringing us together, hasn't he?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, pouring more wine instead. Neil chuckled, oblivious. But Sarah's eyes met mine, questioning and afraid. They didn't know what I held, didn't know the folder's contents. Photos, reports, and proof waited to be revealed. Dinner stretched on, each bite a countdown. I stood to clear a plate, my hand brushing the envelope, and it was time. I set it on the table, and its plain surface drew every eye, but I didn't open it. Not yet. "Dessert soon," I said, my voice calm. My gaze swept over them. The clock struck 11, its chime cutting through the silence. Vanessa's smile faltered, Neil's jaw tightened, and Sarah's breath caught. I sat back, the envelope untouched. My mind was on the moment I chose to strike. The dining room was a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken truths and the sharp tang of wine. Rain battered the windows of our Portland home, a relentless rhythm matching the pulse in my temples. Vanessa's forced laughter cut through the clink of silverware. Neil's jokes landed with a thud, and Sarah's silence screamed louder than words. I sat at the head of the table, the envelope in my pocket a burning weight. My mask, honed over weeks of planning, was a perfect facade. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, each second a step, towards the edge. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping the hardwood. All eyes snapped to me. Vanessa's were wary, Neil's were guarded, and Sarah's were fearful. My hand moved to the folder of photographs I'd kept hidden, tucked beneath a napkin. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The pictures spilled onto the table, a cascade of betrayal. Vanessa and Neil in a cafe, her hand on his. Outside a hotel, his arm around her waist. In his car, their faces too close. The images landed like blows, silencing the room. Vanessa froze, her glass trembling, wine sloshing over the rim. Neil snatched a photo, his jaw tight, his charm crumbling. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping. I watched them, my face a mask, my heart a furnace. 30 years of marriage, countless favors for my brother, and this was their gratitude. "What is this, Michael?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, but it cracked. Her eyes darted to mine. "You're spying on me, spying." "I didn't need to," I said, my tone low and cutting. "You weren't exactly discreet." I leaned forward, my gaze pinning her. "You thought I wouldn't notice." Neil stammered, his hands fumbling with the photo. "Jack, come on, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like." Sarah's voice broke, raw, her eyes blazing at Neil. "You lied to me, to us." She shoved her chair back, tears streaking her face. Vanessa's lips curled in a last grasp at control. "This doesn't concern you, Michael. You shouldn't care." Her words were a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse. In my head I replayed, her laughter with Neil, her powder in my wine. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the envelope, the same one that had held love notes, then evidence, and now something more. Its weight felt final, like a guillotine waiting to fall. "Open it," I said, my movements deliberate, my eyes never leaving hers. I said, my voice steady and cold. Her fingers hesitated, hovering, her breath shallow. The clock struck midnight, its chime like a tolling bell. Rain roared outside, drowning the silence. Vanessa's hand twitched towards the envelope, her eyes wide with something like fear. Neil's face drained of color. Sarah's sobs grew quieter. I stood unmoved, my mind on the scream I knew was coming. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. The dining room was a battlefield, strewn with shattered illusions and spilled wine. The photographs lay scattered across the table, their glossy surfaces reflecting the candlelight and accusations. Rain pounded the windows, a furious roar matching the chaos unfolding inside our Portland home. Vanessa clutched the envelope. I placed it before her, her fingers trembling, her eyes locked on mine. Meanwhile, Neil slumped in his chair, his usual swagger gone, while Sarah turned her tear-streaked face away from him in disgust. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, then stopped, as if time itself held its breath. Vanessa tore open the envelope, the paper ripping with a sound like a wound. A single document slid out. She scanned it, her breath hitching, and then she screamed a raw, piercing sound that cut through the storm outside. The paper fluttered to the floor, and I knew what she had read. A damning medical report detailing a condition that Neil had known about and passed on to her during their affair. I didn't need to name it. Her panic told the story. "You knew?" Vanessa whirled on Neil, her voice a snarl. "You knew and didn't tell me." She lunged, shoving him and raking her nails across his arm. Neil flinched, raising his hands and offering incoherent excuses. "Vanessa, I didn't." "It's not like that." Sarah stood, her chair toppling, her voice shaking with rage. "You monster!" she spat at Neil, then turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Jack, why didn't you warn me?" Her words stung, but I held her gaze unyieldingly. "I warned you tonight," I said, my voice calm. Final, you're free now, Sarah. We both are. Vanessa sank to her knees, clutching the document, her sobs ragged. Jack, please, she begged, her voice breaking. We can fix this. I didn't mean it. You meant every choice. I cut in, my tone cold with every lie and betrayal. You and Neil chose this. I stepped back, my shadow falling over the table. You're not my problem anymore. Neil's head dropped, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Jack, I'm your brother, he mumbled desperately. We're family. Family doesn't do this, I said, turning away. The photographs crunched under my shoe, a fitting end to their charade. Sarah fled the room, her footsteps echoing, and I followed, leaving Vanessa's wails and Neil's silence behind. Outside, the rain soaked my coat, cold and cleansing. The stopped clock stayed in my mind, a symbol of the life I was leaving. I walked to my car, the streetlights blurring in the downpour. My thoughts on the freedom was waiting for me beyond this night. Vanessa's screams still rang in my ears, but I was done carrying their lies. The ocean stretched before my new apartment, its waves providing a steady pulse under a sky free of Portland's endless rain. I stood in the living room, the scent of salt air mingling with fresh paint. 6 months had passed since that night in the dining room, since Vanessa's scream, and Neil's collapse under the weight of their deceit. The divorce papers, signed in a lawyer's office with a steadier hand than I'd expected, were a quiet victory, a line drawn between who I was and who I'd become. I lifted a box, pulling out an old clock, the same one that had stopped during the confrontation. I wound it, its tick filling the room, a sound of renewal. The apartment was small, perched on the Oregon coast, far from the sprawling house I'd built for Vanessa. But it was mine, every corner free of her shadow and her lies. I set the clock on a shelf, its hands moving forward like me. The past lingered, but only in fragments. I'd given up dreams for Vanessa, trips abroad, a boat I'd sketched in my mind while she'd sneered at my small life. Neil, with his slick charm and shadier secrets, had mocked me too, until the truth in that envelope stripped him bare. I didn't know where they were now, nor did I care. Their ruin was of their own making, and I'd walked away clean. I stepped onto the balcony, the ocean's roar a song of possibility. A notebook lay on the table filled with plans, a trip to Italy, a photography course, a life I'd delayed for too long. I'd spent decades balancing books, balancing others' needs, but now the ledger was mine. The envelope, once a vessel for love, then evidence, was gone, burned in a fire pit weeks ago, its ashes scattered like my old life. The sun dipped low, painting the waves gold. I thought of Sarah, hopping she'd I hoped she had found her own peace. I thought of the dining room, the photographs, and the moment I had reclaimed my dignity. Justice wasn't loud. It was this, standing here free. The clock ticked steadily inside, and I smiled, my fingers tracing a postcard from Florence that I had pinned to the wall. I would be there soon, the first of many journeys. The ocean whispered, endless, alive. I leaned on the railing, my shoulders relaxed, my mind clear. The future was open, a horizon I could chart myself. I turned back inside. The rhythm of the clock was a quiet promise. My thoughts were already on the road ahead, where no one could betray me again.